Good to have you with us on this Thursday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to get started this morning with the increasing pressure facing President Biden in his bid for re-election. More Democrats are now raising concerns about the president's candidacy in the wake of that shaky debate against former President Trump.
On Wednesday, Vermont Senator Peter Welch became the first Senate Democrat to call on President Biden to step aside. Now, a lot of lawmakers are keeping an eye on former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who stopped short yesterday of saying that Mr. Biden should stay in the race, but did say it was up to him to decide if he continues. All this is playing out as President Biden prepares to take center stage at the NATO summit later today. He will hold his first solo news conference in 8 months, a public test that many anxious allies will be watching. Speaking yesterday, the president was focused on NATO, saying the alliance is stronger than ever.
I'm very pleased that today all NATO members are making the pledge to expand our industrial base and our industrial capacity, like our defense spending commitment. This new pledge sends an unmistakable message to the world that every NATO member is committed to doing their part to keep the alliance strong. We can and will defend every inch of NATO territory, and we'll do it together.
We've got a team standing by to discuss the current state of the election battle. Let's begin with NBC News correspondent Ali Rafa. So, Ali, we're going to start with the president's highly anticipated NATO news conference. It's coming up later today. What's at stake here, and what is NBC News learning about how he's getting ready?
Yeah, good morning, guys. Well, the president himself has teased this solo press conference as an opportunity for him to show his foreign policy chops, to prove his critics wrong, as we see more and more Democrats call for him to step aside in the 2024 race. And the White House says that while they fully want this press conference to talk about what he's done and his accomplishments, what he's done at this NATO summit, they fully expect questions to really revolve around his age, his mental fitness, and those growing calls for him to step aside. They say that they don't see this as one major high stakes moment that's going to make or break his candidacy, but rather one of many media opportunities they see as helpful in being able to prove these nervous Democrats wrong. And they say, they tell NBC that the president has been prepping throughout the week in between these working sessions with world leaders for the NATO summit, prepping for those expected questions about his age. But one big unknown at this point is really how many questions the president is going to take from reporters, and really how long this press conference is going to last, depending on the amount of follow-up questions he receives from the reporters in the room.
So we've mentioned this growing chorus of Democratic lawmakers voicing those concerns about the president, and we're going to talk about that more in just a moment with Ali Vitale. But let's talk about George Clooney. I mean, a Hollywood heavyweight and a major fundraiser for the president. He wrote this New York Times op-ed where he asked him to step aside. He did not mince words. Tell us just how significant this is, what was in there, and how surprised the White House is considering the fact that he just raised so much money for Biden weeks ago.
Yeah, George Clooney in this op-ed is talking about his lifelong career as a Democrat, what he's done for Democrats, how he's raised a ton of money for Democrats throughout his life. And remember, he was the organizer of this historically large and lucrative fundraiser for the president just a few weeks ago. And he says that it was that experience at that fundraiser, along with the debate performance almost 2 weeks ago now, that is forcing his hand here. He says that this is about one thing and one thing only, age. And he says, quote, "The one battle Joe Biden cannot win is the fight against time. None of us can." He's also saying that party leaders need to stop telling the American people that 51 million people didn't see what we saw on that debate stage on June 27th. He also touches on what the president and the White House have been arguing when they say that the president is in the position he's in because of the democratic process that got him to this point, meaning the primary process. Clooney saying in this op-ed, quote, "It's disingenuous at best to argue that Democrats have already spoken with their vote, and therefore the nomination has settled and done when we just received new and upsetting information." He says Joe Biden is a hero. He saved democracy in 2020. We need him to do it again. And the White House is pushing back on this. They're referring to that letter that the president sent to congressional Democrats saying that he is in this race to win it, that he's not going anywhere. And they're pointing to several Democrats who are continuing to say that they will support the president. Obviously, Clooney is not one one of these politicians calling for him to step aside, but his words do carry weight. And the money that he is giving and other major donors from Hollywood are giving are what keep these campaigns, especially at this scale, running, you guys.
Yeah, and speaking of money, Allie, we understand all this is having a negative impact on the Biden campaign's fundraising efforts. I mean, what is NBC News learning about this?
Yeah, so initially after the debate, the Biden campaign reported an uptick among donors, and you heard the president talk about that in his ABC News interview. He said there was a major uptick, especially among grassroots donations that were under $200 in the aftermath of that debate. But sources are telling NBC News that has slowed down significantly across the board, and officials are bracing for a seismic change in the coming weeks. Two sources said that this month alone is on a path to be down by possibly half, if not more. But the Biden team, for their part, is downplaying this. They're saying they're pointing to those grassroots donations that were given after the debate, the small dollar donations, and they're saying that this expected fallout is not going to make a huge impact, guys.
All right, Allie Rafa. Allie, thank you so much.
Now let's go to our other Allie, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Allie Vitale. She joins us for more on the president's future, specifically what we are hearing here from Congress. Allie, good morning. So Nancy Pelosi, she is the latest and probably the most influential House member, Congresswoman, to speak about President Biden's election campaign. First, let's listen to what she said on Morning Joe.
It's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short. I want him to do whatever he decides to do. And that's the way it is. Whatever he decides, we go with.
These comments come as sources tell you and your Hill colleagues that House Democratic Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries plans to relay member concerns to the president. What should people make of Pelosi's comments? What do those other concerns sound like, and how do we see that meeting going?
You know, I have to tell you guys, on Tuesday, after Democrats, both in the House and Senate, had their various huddles, they had long kind of family-style discussions. They were told not to leak it to reporters because they think that's hurting the process. But there were a lot of concerns that were aired. In the aftermath of those meetings, at the end of the day on Tuesday, it really did sort of feel like, yeah, maybe some other members would come out and express doubts. And of course, we saw that. But by and large, it felt like this was coming towards some kind of conclusion. And then, of course, nearly 24 hours ago to the minute, former Speaker Nancy Pelosi went on Morning Joe, and for someone who is always very specific, very nothing happens by accident with the Speaker Emerita, those comments really reverberated around Capitol Hill. And just in the last few minutes, guys, we have a new statement from her spokesperson who is trying to once again underscore the fact that Pelosi is publicly in Biden's corner. Her spokesperson telling us it's completely false that Speaker Pelosi has told members that President Biden needs to step aside. The spokesperson also says that Speaker Pelosi said explicitly in that Morning Joe interview that members should hold off any public statements about concerns on the president until after the NATO summit concludes. That is what I took from Pelosi's interview, where she was pressed on the fact that Biden has decided he's staying in the race. But nevertheless, we're going to see potentially after the NATO summit ends, more members could come forward. And frankly, I have to tell you guys, I've heard from other Democratic members of Congress who have said there are more members who want to come forward, be it to voice their concerns or to say that President Biden should no longer be the party's standard bearer. So just because NATO's ending, just because a lot of people are looking at this press conference that the president is going to give later today, doesn't mean that this is the end of this.
Let's move over to the Senate. As we mentioned, Vermont Senator Peter Welch is now the first Democratic senator to call for the president to step aside. So we know today the caucus is expected to meet with senior Biden advisors. What are they going to cover in that meeting?
This is really meant to quell the panic, quell the frustration that we have seen from senators, and certainly there is a lot of it, especially because so many of these concerns come from the fact that senators and House members feel like they haven't been presented with a plan to win, a path forward. They want to see the data. They don't want to argue with the feelings, with the vibes, which I can tell you are bad. They instead want to feel like they have facts at their fingertips and that they have seen fresh data that shows there's a path forward here. That's why this meeting, it's a special meeting for Senate Democrats with a trio of top Biden campaign officials. There are some who are griping that the president won't be there. Of course, the NATO summit is still ongoing, but there are others who feel like this is a meeting that they've wanted for a long time. And I have to tell you, there's no member that I've spoken to who relishes this moment that their party is in. There is a lot of love and respect for President Biden, the role that he has played over the course of the last 4 years, but also the fact that he has really been a person who has been prevalent in Washington for decades as a member of the Senate, a powerful chairman of the Judiciary Committee there. He is a known quantity on Capitol Hill. A lot of these members are almost begging for something that can assuage their concerns, make them feel better about their own reelection chances, not just the party's reelection chances against Trump. This meeting with Biden campaign officials is a chance to do that. There's a question about if it's too little, too late, or if people are just the vibes are so baked in as bad that there's not a way to shift them at this point. That's really the open question on the Hill right now.
All right, we love when you give it to it straight, Allie. Bad vibes. Thank you very much. Good to have you.
All right, let's bring in NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray for more on the state of the rake. Mark, good morning. Today marks 2 weeks since the first presidential debate in Atlanta. It feels like longer, but yes, 2 weeks today. I mean, walk us through some of the new polls out since then. What are they telling us?
Yeah, Joe, we've actually seen a whole lot of polls that have been taken since that debate 2 weeks ago. And for the most part, the polls show that the race really hasn't budged all that much. Some polls like CNN show that the race is actually identical to where it was before the debate. And you have polls like the CBS YouGov poll that shows 1 point in direction for Donald Trump. The New York Times Siena poll shows 2 points in direction for Donald Trump. So if there has been some movement, it's been in Donald Trump's direction. But all of that movement is within the margin of error. Now, Joe, it is important to note that many polls showed Joe Biden trailing going into that debate, and that they still show him trailing, to me, is significant. And also, sometimes when you just have 1 or 2 point movement, that could actually be decisive in a race. But the data doesn't necessarily suggest that we have a radically transformed race after the debate.
So, of course, the big conversation has been about the president's mental fitness here. What are voters saying about the ability of each of them to serve as president?
Yeah, Savannah, we end up talking about, how the race hasn't changed that much in a lot of polls. But what has changed are just perceptions about President Biden's cognitive and mental health, which have actually gotten worse. There was a CBS News poll before the debate. 65% had big concerns about Biden's mental health and cognitive health to be president. Now that's jumped up after the debate to 72%. So that is kind of significant. What had been a liability for President Biden has gotten a little bit worse.
Of course, Mark, the national polls are one thing, but we do have an electoral college here. So let's zero in on the 7 key states that analysts say will play a big role in deciding who wins. What's the polling telling us about those battleground states?
Yeah, Joe, the best kind of group came from the Bloomberg Morning Consult poll, which actually kind of showed that the race was pretty much the same before the debate as it is after. But what is significant is that, the races where President Biden seems to be running better against Donald Trump are in those key states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. But in the states like Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada, President Biden had been trailing before the debate and trails in a lot of consensus afterwards. And it's worth noting that the really respected Cook Political Report ended up moving the states like Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia into the lean Republican category.
All right, Mark Murray breaking down the numbers for us. Mark, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Well, let's take a look at the Trump campaign now. There's only 4 more days until the start of the Republican National Convention, and the former president is back on the campaign trail and taking aim at President Biden. NBC's Garrett Hake has the details.
Former President Donald Trump back on the campaign trail, newly lashing out at President Biden's debate performance.
Joe's own party now wants him to throw in the towel and surrender the presidency after a single 90-minute performance.
Mr. Trump suggesting without evidence that President Biden's poor debate performance was the culmination of a collapsing Democratic cover-up.
They are all co-conspirators in the sinister plot to defraud the American public about the cognitive abilities of the man in the Oval Office.
The former president faced questions about his own mental fitness from within his own party as recently as the GOP primary.
But when you're dealing with the pressures of a presidency, we can't have someone else that we question whether they're mentally fit to do this.
Mr. Trump previewing the platform he'll promote at next week's Republican convention.
And on day 1, we will begin the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. We have no choice.
And teasing his upcoming choice of a running mate, expected to come from a short list that includes Florida Senator Marco Rubio.
We know who our nominee is. He's going to be the next president of the United States, and his name is...
In a radio interview, Mr. Trump said he was, quote, pretty well set on his VP selection, but might wait even until the convention opens next week to announce his choice, drawing out the drama for maximum political impact.
All right, Garrett, thank you.
Maryland lawmakers are calling on the federal government to pay to rebuild the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which collapsed in Baltimore after it was hit by a cargo ship. Now, in an NBC News exclusive, the sole survivor from that collapse is speaking out for the first time. More than 3 months later, he tells NBC News Now anchor Tom Yamas how he had to fight for his life.
Hold on traffic on the Key Bridge. There's a ship approaching. It just lost their steering.
When the cargo ship Dolly slammed into Baltimore's Key Bridge, causing it to collapse, 7 construction workers were hurled into the Patapsco River.
Like there is no bridge. Like there is no bridge.
6 of the workers would die, all but Julio Cervantes Suarez.
This image is frozen in your head?
Sí.
Why? ¿Por qué?
Porque es el barco que...
It's the ship that destroyed 6 families, he says. For the first time, he's telling his story of survival. Just before 1:30 a.m., as the Dolly was making its way under the Key Bridge, Cervantes and his crew were on a break towards the middle of the bridge, eating in their vehicles.
There's a ship approaching. It just lost their steering. So until you get that under control, we got to stop all traffic.
Though police had been alerted, Cervantes says they had no idea the 947-foot-long vessel was about to hit the bridge. He says suddenly everything started to shake. He witnessed his co-workers all slide into the water one by one, and then so did he.
Do you remember what was going through your head as you're falling into the water?
Pensé que...
I thought we might never get out, he says.
Did you pray? Did you scream?
Gracias a Dios.
He says he thanked God, asked him to take care of his wife and family, and asked for forgiveness for everything he'd done. When the frigid water started to fill his truck cabin, he realized he was alive. And luckily, his car had manual windows. He rolled one down and got out of his truck. But there was another problem.
Do you know how to swim?
No sé nadar.
Cervantes says he floated to a piece of the bridge lodged in the river and started to call out for his co-workers.
Alejandro, Dorian, Miguel.
But he heard nothing. Among those who died, his brother-in-law and his 18-year-old nephew, who he considered a son. He wishes he could have one last conversation with him and thank him for being part of his life.
Gracias por dejarme ser parte de su vida.
Lawyers representing 5 of the victims, including Cervantes, plan to file suit in the coming weeks against all companies involved with the ship. The NTSB has reported the ship had power trouble in the days leading to the disaster.
They had multiple issues, not just before hitting the bridge, but before even getting to this port.
Imagine being on a bridge and watching your friends and family members drop one by one by one before you.
Our thanks to Tom Yamas for bringing us that story.
Well, this morning, the weather story that won't cool down. Tens of millions of Americans from coast to coast are still under dangerous heat alerts. And now the record-breaking temperatures are being blamed for dozens of heat-related deaths in the U.S. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin is in Washington, D.C., where it is so hot. Look at this. An outdoor wax art installation of President Lincoln is melting.
Hey there, it's been absolutely sweltering here in Washington, D.C. I want you to check something out because this is the talk of this neighborhood. This is what remains of a waxwork replica of the Lincoln Memorial. It was installed outside this elementary school back in February. Now a melted mess. The artist tells us they always knew it could potentially melt. I mean, it is made of wax, just not this quickly. A stark illustration of just how hot it has been in the Capitol, and also to put things into consideration with this heat wave. I was speaking to the head of that summit, the NATO Security Summit. He's in charge of security here in the Capitol for dozens of world leaders, and in his mind, the greatest threat to that summit at this point is the heat, is these extreme temperatures, because these extreme temperatures can be deadly, contributing to more than 36 deaths across at least 6 states. We're also seeing some record temps continuing out west, with Las Vegas hitting at least 118 degrees on back-to-back days. Spare a thought for the folks in Houston. More than 1 million still without power after Hurricane Beryl caused damage. Remnants of that deadly storm also causing havoc in the Northeast, including 2 destructive tornadoes overnight in upstate New York. And speaking to doctors, they say that if you are suffering any symptoms of heat exhaustion, including muscle aches, headaches, the key here is to act quickly. Cool off as fast as you can. Stay inside and stay hydrated. Back to you.
Oh, what a visual, Aaron. Thank you so much.
Keep your candles inside, too. All right, let's get more from meteorologist Angie Lassman.
Angie, good morning.
Good morning. Good advice, Joe. Keep your candles inside. All right. We, no surprise, have plenty of these heat alerts. This has been ongoing. You heard Aaron talking about how impactful it's been over the past couple of days. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to have a whole lot in the way of relief over the next few days. Here's the deal right now. Plenty of alerts. 53 million people, including major cities of Salt Lake City, Las Vegas, LA, Phoenix. You can see Houston also included in this, as well as Manchester. These are going to be spots that see temperatures be way above normal once again today and potentially record-breaking. Here's some of those records. Las Vegas, the record for this date, 116. We're expected to hit 118 there today. Palm Springs, maybe not a record, but still a pretty impressive afternoon high of 119 degrees. We've got Phoenix at 115. Again, not a record, but still really uncomfortable. Across the board here, up and down California and out towards the Rockies, Salt Lake City expected to hit 105 this afternoon. As we look ahead to the weekend, of course, lots of folks maybe have outdoor plans. We really, as I mentioned, don't have a whole lot of good news when it comes to dwindling temperatures. We've got 116 in Las Vegas on Friday, but notice what happens by the time we get to Sunday. A little bit of an improvement, but not much. We'll take what we can get at this point, but a high of 109 on Sunday for any plans that you have in that city. We've got 117 for Friday in Palm Springs, ending up at 111 by Sunday. Salt Lake City, more of the same. The triple digits are going to stay with us. So that's what's going on as far as the heat is concerned. We finally are dealing with some quieter conditions across parts of the Northeast after we saw quite an active afternoon, evening yesterday as those remnants of Beryl started to move offshore. We saw flooding issues. We saw severe weather potential. All of that is going to kind of wind down today. And you can already see on your satellite and radar doing just that. Much of that rain still draped across parts of Maine, but otherwise we're looking a little quieter for this region. We do still have some flood alerts in effect. We've finally gotten rid of some of those flash flood warnings that we had all morning long, but the flood watches are still up across parts of this region, stretching from New York up into Maine. So just a heads up there, we could still see some standing water on those roadways. So as you get out for your morning drive, something to watch for. That's the front that we're going to be watching over the next couple of days. It's going to eventually stall and kind of be draped across parts of the East Coast. This leaves us a little unsettled in some spots. You can see specifically across parts of the mid-Atlantic. That's where we'll watch for some heavy rain to develop right near that low pressure system. The flooding will be probably an issue for folks here. It's not going to be anything like what we saw from Beryl, but it could still impact some of those afternoon plans. Not a great day to be at the beach, unfortunately, if that was on your docket for Saturday across that region. Rainfall amounts 1 to 3 inches, but I think a couple of spots, especially across parts of the coastal Carolinas, could see upwards of 5 inches. Meanwhile, out west, guys, it's hot. No surprise, that's not going to change. I mentioned that the humidity will stay in place too for the middle of the country, specifically the southeast, and that heavy rain will be something that we watch on Saturday across the east as well. We'll finally see some nicer conditions, quieter conditions for the northeast by the time Sunday rolls around. But the heat continues.
I was going to say, I'm all for the rain if it brings cooler temps, but it's not.
You know, the northeast, we're a little less humid today. We've seen a lot of the alerts across the southeast expire when it comes to heat, but the west, they just can't catch a break just yet.
And they need it.
They sure do.
Thank you so much. See you in a little bit.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.